Terry Pratchett, welcome to the program. I read that one of your British fans drove for a day to go to one of your book signings, and then he stood in the freezing rain for 6 hours, and he said afterwards that it was worth it to see you because you're an incredible writer and an incredibly nice man. Do compliments get any better than that?
Oh yeah, I get kissed by the ladies, which is I think that's better than that, to tell you the truth. Yeah. After a while, you just learn to smile and have a beer and all the rest of it. You get very embarrassed, for heaven's sake, because when you go home, you're just your wife's husband, and you've got to go and clean out the cat box.
It must be such a nice privilege, though, to have a job where people want to tell you how much they appreciate you. It's not like if you're a lift maintenance guy and, this lift got me from...
Well, I always tell the lift maintenance guy that I'm really pleased that we actually got to the bottom in one piece. I had to go and find, it's down normally in the basement somewhere, screwing things together. But yeah, I understand what you mean, but it becomes just part of the job. And there is a dark side, because you do a lot of things for the fans, because, I suppose you want to maintain that image, and you don't want them to find out what a terrible old curmudgeon you are, really.
Does it get difficult, though, I presume you must have the same conversation over and over again at book signings?
Yeah, but that makes it fairly easy for me, because you can let the brain go on at half speed, because you know how to go all the way to the end of this sentence. You accommodate. That's how it goes.
Why do you think your fans are so particularly dedicated?
Because I'm an extremely good and knowledgeable writer with an almost perfect understanding of the commonality of mankind.
Well, that's obvious.
It's true.
When I finish a book, if I've particularly loved it, I often miss the characters. Do you, as a writer, miss your characters?
Have you read my books?
Mm-hmm. Oh, I've read some of them, not all of them.
I mean, you've actually gone and read some of my books.
And
you're a journalist.
I must admit that when I was in my early 20s, a young man that I was good friends with was a very big fan and insisted that I read some of the Discworld books.
I hope you didn't go any further with him.
I couldn't possibly say on national television. It made me blush.
I don't know. I mean, I have the what you might call the fan gene, and it's close, and it's associated with all the other different kinds of genes. When I was a kid, I was a fan of science fiction and fantasy as a whole, and most importantly, I was a fan of reading as a whole. And yeah, the interesting thing is, at this recent convention, there were people there of all ages, and indeed, I mean all ages. There was one elderly lady there with a walking stick, but her costume was out of Conan the Barbarian, and on the walking stick was a skull. And I thought, right on, this is the grey generation at its best.
And what did you say to her?
I spent a lot of time talking to her, and I made her my honorary concubine for the day.
I bet she was thrilled with that.
She was. Her son. She burst out laughing hilariously, and then her son looked a bit puzzled because he didn't know how old people have their little jokes.
Your book sales are in the millions. You have millions of fans. I've mentioned how zealous they are. But you've recently become known beyond the fans of your books because you've gone public to discuss the fact that you have a rare form of Alzheimer's disease, and you've become an advocate for the right to assisted death. What made you decide to do that?
When I was sitting there thinking about the Alzheimer's, and I thought, well, what I'd like is, let's hang out and do the best we can. And then I'd very much like to have a lie down in the sunshine somewhere, listening to Thomas Tallis on the iPod after a nice brandy, and the nice friendly doctor will give me the little jab, which would just send me away. And I had so much mail after that. And as a result, I did the Dimbleby lecture, which you may have heard about, and again I talked about it, and again the mail came in. Most of it, by far most of it, was from people who agreed and said, yes, that's exactly right, that's what we want. Why, if you're old and lame and you can't be cured and the disease is getting worse every day, are you expected to grin and bear it just because someone would like to care for you? It's not up to them, it's up to you. And they said, and so many people said, I'd just like to die carefully, with dignity, at the end of my life, rather than take my choices with care. And I don't know about here, but in the UK, that is a bit of a gamble. And
legally, you mean?
No, I mean that, for example, in Northern Ireland recently, a woman has just been a carer for a very elderly Alzheimer's patient. And every day she took the woman her meal, but she ate the meal in front of the patient. She was found because the patient's children put a secret spy camera in the room. Doesn't that shock you?
It does.
Doesn't it make you think that the punishment should be a little medieval? One lone woman, bewildered. Now, I have money. I could probably, not have to put up with that sort of thing. And my wife says she could look after me. But my wife is the same age as me, and she doesn't really understand how Alzheimer's progresses. And I don't think a woman into her 70s or 80s can deal with a husband with Alzheimer's all by herself. And what would I do if she died?
Opinion polls, in this country at least, show that people overwhelmingly support
Yes,
them.
isn't that funny? So why isn't this country taking it on?
Well, I was going to ask you...
It's because of curdled Christianity.
Is that the same in the UK?
Yes. Ultimately, people with... initially, people said, well, how can you make certain that people aren't... It's the traditional thing, forcing Granny to die before her time. And any doctor would tell you that it's hard enough to get families to understand that Granny must die sometimes. So in the hospital, they will say, look, she's really very old. It is past her time. We're keeping her alive. But this is what the more sensible doctors say. But really... she should go on to the Liverpool care path, which is where they just gently let you go. And they say, no, not Granny, we want to keep her going. And the doctor, some doctors, quite a lot of them, in peril of their livings, I have to say, write to me about this. And they don't realise that Granny isn't really all there more. And what is the point of keeping the shell going? This is doctors saying. And you have to remember that in Belgium and Holland and Switzerland, this now happens now. I was speaking recently to one of the doctors that oversees this in Holland, and he says, it's now, as it were, socially acceptable. People talk about it. They think it's sensible. Live a good life and make it as long as you possibly can, but at the end, then leave with dignity. As the Victorians did. Do you think there's pictures of the Victorians sitting around granddaddies, passing away, and all the little girls are crying. Behind all that was the doctor and the morphine, making certain that granddad went just at the right moment, just after the prayers.
So what role do you think that governments should have in this issue? Because it's treated as a societal issue rather than an individual issue.
It's an individual issue. It should be. The fact that one person has an assisted death does not mean that anyone else, by any means, should have one. I'm absolutely clear on this, and so is everybody else that does it. And if you go to Switzerland, for example, where they do allow foreigners to die, which I think shames everybody involved. the person who wants to die has to make it very clear over a period of days to a doctor that this is what they want to do. And the reasons for wanting to die are set out, because they're not all that keen on letting someone die just because they really feel like it. It really has to be, you have to be possessed of a bad disease. But what happens is, I think some of the Christian majority these days put a spoke in the wheel. And they say that God, they say, what about the sanctity of human life? And I say, what about the dignity of human life? All animals die. Humans can die with dignity.
In your case, with your Alzheimer's disease, what effect is it having on you so far? Because people watching this interview will be thinking, he's talking very well, he's completely lucid, I can't see anything wrong.
Talk to me again in 2 years' time. It's a cumulative thing. But also...
Are you noticing it having an effect on you yet?
Yes. Bits drop out. The short-term memory is gone, and so has the short-term memory. The short-term memory, okay, little joke, won't be so funny in the fullness of time, but laughter is the best medicine.
Well, you have a reputation in your books for being able to wring humour out of dark situations.
Oh, indeed. PCA, which is posterior cortical atrophy, that means that my problems are more or less with, if you put a glass down on that table, I'd have to look, okay, table, glass. In other words, I wouldn't just pick it up. It's depth vision and all kinds of weird things, often to do with your sight. Nothing wrong with the sight, but the parts of the brain dealing with the sight have some difficulty.
And what about on your writing process?
Oh, that's easy, because first of all I have Rob, and I can dictate to him.
What's Rob for people?
No, Rob is my PA.
Oh, okay, right.
The other thing it's doing is changing my voice, I have to tell you. And because I can afford it, I can dictate to him. And I'm a storyteller, and stories want to be told to another human being. So I dictate to him. That's where the best work comes out. And besides which, I can see if he laughs in all the best bits. And when I'm by myself and I've got sort of less important things to do, am I allowed to use proprietorial terms here?
Please.
There's something called drag and dictate, which everyone has heard of. It's a text-to-speech thing, but it needs something to be requested. And a bunch of guys in England came up with something called talking point, and that's just changed I can sit there talking to the computer, and more or less it gets it right, and it has... this is magic. They put all my books in the computer, and overnight it worked out how to say the words. Didn't always get it right, but it has all kind of algorithms and...
so words of characters' names and invented places.
Well, yes,
and
Granny Weatherwax, it worked out quite quickly. Is this a reasonably adult programme?
It is.
It didn't know the word arsehole. And of course, a journalist and a writer will use all kinds of words, and I'm afraid it took me two goes to teach it. You just type out the word and then say arsehole.
You're having some fun with this, aren't you?
Well, in a sense, and it's like in the old equivalent of the days of the old typewriter. You'd spend some time cleaning out the letters with a pin.
Are you one of those people who used to turn your calculator upside down to make the numbers spell rude words?
No, I was never as gone as all that. but it does mean that I can do, perfectly straightforward letters, as easy as pie. The only reason it's slightly more difficult for me than other people is that I do have a big vocabulary. It can even now understand the vernacular of the Nac-Mac Feegle, who are tiny, tiny little kind of Scottish imps, and they go, go away, and it can actually pick it up. I've trained it so that I have some fun with that, and it does, as it were, keep me human, because if I could not communicate, then I would want to die.
I know you've given a lot of money to Alzheimer's research. What sort of progress are scientists making in that field?
Well, in my opinion, a lot is going into diagnosis, which I think is actually rather wasted, because if you have Alzheimer's, you will find out soon enough. With PC, it's slightly more difficult because that is a rare variant, and some people might not look in the right place. And it took me a couple of months at least, rather more than a couple of months, to know why I wasn't typing well, wasn't remembering things, and so on. And it is true that once you have a diagnosis, even though that diagnosis is of the worst disease that you can have, at least the worst well-known disease that you can have, at least you know what it is. But it's Alzheimer's, and there's precious little help. There's precious little help from the government. You contact other people. I have a number of contacts who have the same disease, and we talk to each other about it. That helps you. Do you find that, oh yes, and what do you do about it? And we try this. But by and large, you're left alone, especially at the end, and it's usually the spouse which takes the blunt of it.
Are you afraid of death?
No.
He's a rather likeable character in your books.
Yes, he owes me a lot of money.
He's made you a lot of money.
Who can be afraid of death? What's there to be afraid of?
Well, the unknown.
Oh no, I treasure the unknown. It's the here and now that worries me. Oh my word. No, it's what people dread is the dying, not the death. And that's why I think assisted dying comes in. It takes you from the life to the death without the inconvenient bit in the middle.
And how will you know for yourself when it's time to go?
I thought it was about last Thursday myself. I had a convention to attend. For someone with Alzheimer's, it's rather difficult. As you know, the only place where you can go to die legally, I've got a fan with a very high-powered sniper rifle and full training, and he said, just tell me where you walk. You won't see it coming. But I thought, it makes such a mess. So I said, no, I'll call you back on that one. And the thing is that the nice people in Switzerland who allow you to die as if it was some glorious thing. That's a federal thing. You have to be able to say very clearly that you want to die. And plus, you'll have all the paperwork from your doctors saying that you have got Alzheimer's or motor neuro and all the other things. They're not gung-ho about this. They don't want to commit murder. Sooner or later, with Alzheimer's, your voice is going to go. And even then, possibly, if you can make the right gestures, it'll work. And there's people are being frightened in England unnecessarily. They're being told that if someone helps their wife or husband to go, even helps their wife or husband to go to Switzerland, they could be facing a jail sentence. This is a load of what we call dingo's kidneys. I'm sure you know what dingo's kidneys are here. Oh, Douglas Adams came up with it, but you can guess what it means. It's a load of old balls. Because actually, underneath that terrible exterior, our bureaucracy is sensible. And no one is really going to send a wife to prison for helping her stricken husband. Obviously, if she's knifed him to death, obviously she's not going to be forgiven. But there are ways of making certain easy ways of making certain that the people who die are the right people who are dying for the right reasons.
But the issues you raise, though, with the boxes you have to tick when you want to die, that you've got to have the documents and explain that you're ready to go, blah blah blah. Doesn't Alzheimer's disease make that particularly difficult?
It does, and it does for various other people. It means that you may have to go before perhaps you should. Now, what I really like is what they do in, is it Wyoming? Not Wyoming, I've forgotten. Who is it? There's one of the United States.
Oregon.
Oregon, that's right. That's what PCA does. It moves the stuff around. It's like the little blocks move. Once you're diagnosed of the disease and they said, yes, you are a candidate, this fits the thing, they give you the potion. And that's it, you can take off with it. You're told not to put it in a jar marked lemonade, my little gag, and not to do it outdoors where people can see. Because there's such a thing as good manners, you know. But the thing is, there is some evidence that people live longer. They know that they could die if they took this medicine. But it's a nice day today and it doesn't feel too bad. And the wife's cooking a really good dinner, so maybe I'll die tomorrow. And then tomorrow, oh, well, the grandchildren are coming. Maybe I'll die tomorrow. And one guy who was expected to die within 2 years was still going after 3 years. Because every day he did the most human thing. He decided whether he was going to die, and he decided whether he was going to live. Animals can't do that. It's nice to think that man can. It's perhaps one of the greatest things we can ever do.
Sir Terry, it's been so lovely to meet you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.